I thought about an hour ago that I was supposed to speak on a certain topic with a certain scripture, but up until about 5 minutes ago, I was worried, maybe I should go back to that. Maybe I should do something different. Maybe I should. And like I said, about 5 minutes ago, a gentleman just said, the Lord is with me. And so it gives me confidence to share with you something that you may not understand or know or realize or may have experienced before. But I'd like to just share with you a few things that are on my heart tonight. So just wanted to give you some statistics. As Bob told you a moment ago, I'm the youth director here at the church. I've been here since 2002. And as you sit there, as I'm looking around, I don't see many folks out there with children or grandchildren that are in the youth program. So I thought I would start out with giving you a few facts about who we are, okay? Now, when I say the youth group, I'm talking about teenagers who are between 11 and 19 or 6th grade to 12th grade. That's who I get to work with. Sometimes college kids and sometimes their families as well. But that's principally who I work with. And this group is called Generation Alpha. You've heard of Generation Y and Generation Z and Generation X and Millennials. But this group, any child, any person born at 2012 until this year, it's either Generation Millennium before 2012 and Generation Alpha. In about 20 years, there'll be Generation Beta and so on and so forth. But I get to work with the teenagers here, and I just think that we kind of need to know who these teenagers are that we get to work with. And because I say we, that means you along with me. You see, we're all partners in this ministry thing. And whether you get to hands-on work with teenagers and their families, your prayers, your support of this church, your help in whatever way you see fit is a huge, huge help to me and to their families as well. I look out here and see a few people that have had direct hands with the program, have helped me in many, many ways since 2002, and have been big supports. And I do appreciate those of you who have played a big part, not only in my own life, but in the lives of these teenagers. But I did want to, like I said, share a few things with you about them. The group is about 50% middle school and about 50% high school teenagers. Most of these kids come from families or from homes that are divorced. It's about 60% divorced, 40% still have their parents married. 2 to 4% of them come from blended homes where moms and dads bring together their children and combine one big happy family, kind of like the Brady Bunch a few years ago. We didn't call the Brady Bunch the blended family back then, but that's exactly who and what they were. We have 3 grandparents. 3 of our teenagers are being raised by their custodial grandparents because the parents are not capable physically, mentally, financially to take care of their own children. So we have several kids and have had several kids through the years be raised by a grandparent. And 4 of our teenagers come and are being raised by single parents. 40% of our teenagers that we work with, their parents cannot have a job, hold a job, or get a job. Either unemployable, cannot hold a job down with all they have to do. And the other 60%, half of the 60% have 2 wage earners. So mom and dad have at least 2 jobs, and in a lot of cases, 3 jobs between the 2 of them. Most of our kids come from a lower economic background to a middle income background. Just a few come from an upper background economically. And a lot of these kids, because they are from grandparents or being raised by their grandparents, they're not drawing much of an income at all except Social Security and maybe any income that the government gets for raising their children. Let's see. In the last 5 years, 7 of our teenagers who are being raised by a parent or a grandparent, 5 have died. We had 3 in 1 year. 3 in 1 year. That's just not normal. That's just not normal. But this is who we get to work with. 6% of our students are in the school band. 40% of them are involved in sports, whether through the school or community. Kids who are in the process, teenagers that I'm working with right now, will be leaving this area before June of 2019. 12 students of ours will be gone by June 2019 because their jobs, their parents are taking them somewhere else. We're not talking about seniors in high school who are graduating. That's 12 more. So by June 2019, we'll be losing 24 of our students. That's in less than a year. 12. That's a lot of kids that we may never ever get to see again or see on a very short-term basis. Since 2018, January 1, 2018, 11 of our teenagers have been sent to us because they are court-ordered to do so because they got in trouble and have to do or perform community service hours to fulfill their requirement to the community for the crime that may have committed. And we've been working with 5 more teenagers this year who have to have 100 hours or more of community service in order to graduate from high school. We've had 2 parents this year lose custody of their children. We have 3 teenagers whose parents are either currently incarcerated, 5 more who have been incarcerated. 2 of them for murder. 2 of them for murder. Those numbers are huge. But this is the world that we have out there today, folks. You're not going to read about this in the paper. You can certainly read about all the bad things, but you're not going to hear about these kids or their lives or where they came from. So let's talk about for something that you do read a lot about every single day. Politics. Go ahead, everybody on the count of 3, everybody groan. 1, 2, 3. Politics. You know, it's the one thing you should never talk about at the dinner table, right? Thanksgiving and Christmas, 2 things you shouldn't talk about. Politics and religion. They say run for the hills or curl up in a ball. You just stay away from politics. And I'm not about to talk about politics, but I am a news junkie. I love to watch the news. I have to know what's going on at all times. I love my CNN, my Fox, my MSNBC. Read it, watch it, listen to it. I've got to know what's going on in the world. And I don't know if you've been following the news lately, but there's been a lot of news about a certain person who's been nominated to be part of the Supreme Court recently. You've heard a little bit about that, have you? There's been a whole lot back and forth about a gentleman by the name of Brett Kavanaugh. And it's gone through the questioning process, the nominating process, people wanting to get to know him, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and back and forth and back and forth. Why do I bring him up right now? It's because of this discussion. This past summer, the teenagers and I have had a class called Hot Buttons. And what that is they get to choose some of the topics in this world, things that they have to deal with, topics and issues that matter to them and their families. And all summer we got to talk about the things that bother them, that concern them, that affect them in some way or the other. But the last class we had was about this very same issue, about the Brett Kavanaugh situation. And the question posed to them was this: does what we do the actions that we take, do the comments that we make at any point in our life have any difference on what happens in our future? That was the question. Anything from the past, regardless of your age, whether you're 10 or 110, do the actions that you take of any age make a difference in this world? In fact, one article that I have right here, just the topic of it, just the whole title of the whole thing was, well, we did that kind of stuff when we were teenagers. Didn't we all do that kind of stuff? I didn't. But this is our answer. That it doesn't matter what we do, society says. Doesn't matter what we say. Doesn't make a difference on our future anyway. I think we're biting from that apple from the forbidden tree. It wasn't an apple, don't yell at me later, it was just a fruit. But we all seem to be buying into this concept that the things that happened in the past have no bearing, play no part in our future. But I disagree. The teenagers that we work with today are making choices and facing situations and circumstances that I never had to face. Being raised by a single parent, being raised by your grandparents, being raised with so very little money, can't go to school with any money in your pocket to pay for a lunch. Not just going to school or wearing the same clothes several times when you go to school. I actually, when I first moved here in 2003, went to visit some kids that might be part of the youth program. And this is right over here off of Mariner Drive. Walked over to this family, to their house, and as sure as I'm sitting there, here, I walked in there, and they had no floor in their house. It was a dirt floor. Dirt floor. There's no flooring in that house. This is our world here in this area, and this is what these kids are facing and dealing with today. The question is, again, do the things that we say and do in the past have any bearing on what we do in the future? And I absolutely say they do. This millennial group that I was talking about a moment ago, the Generation Alpha, let me tell you a little bit about who they are, or who we as society are making them to be. They're a very distrusting group. They scrutinize everything we say and everything we do. They just don't look at a person and make a decision about whether they like them or not. They want to see or hear them do something so they can decide for themselves. They're tech savvy, but have little common sense. You kind of relate to that, those of you who know, and people that have teenagers. Tech savvy, can work on their cell phones, can work on computers, but have very little common sense or judgment skills. They're connected to the world. You can play video games with somebody in China and Singapore and Russia, but you don't know your neighbor's name. And they're very lonely people. You can live in the same house with a family member. You can live in the same house with people you grew up with and still be lonely. And still play a video game with somebody in Brazil. They tend to be more spoiled than their parents before them and their grandparents before them, and coddled by mom and dad. We tell them they're special. Doesn't matter why they're special, for what reason they're special. But they have to be told, or like to be told, that they're very special. And that they'll grow up to be something great without also being responsible for the things that they do. Generation Alpha will be very self-sufficient. They'll be able to do things on their own or not. If we get a car, if they get a car in the future, it'll drive itself. You can walk in your house and tell your vacuum to clean the floor. You can tell your robot to go to the bathroom and clean the toilet. They will be self-sufficient but reliant on so many other things in this world. Techno-savvy, but not able to do the most basic things. Somewhat self-aware, self-taught on many different subjects, but they're not connected. Listen to me very carefully. Not connected to any faith, any denomination, or any church. You and I grew up, many of us grew up in families where church was very important, where families went to church together. If your family didn't go to church together, perhaps you went with a friend's family that went to church. Many of the guys on my block that I grew up, my parents, we went to church every Sunday and every Wednesday. Sometimes twice on Sunday. Their parents didn't take them to church, so they'd all tumble into our family's station wagon. We all went to church together. Not this group of kids that we're raising today. Not connected to any church, any faith, any religion at all. And many of the teenagers that I work with today, their parents don't go to church anywhere. They'll come to church for special occasions. If you have a concert and their little kid is coming to sing or to perform or to play, they'll come to church. They'll come to church at Christmas, or they'll come to church at Easter, and if they're going to get up and say something special or be baptized, they'll come to church. But a lot of these kids' parents not connected to church. They are distrustful of all or most authority. However, they see their parent as their closest ally in life. They're still looking for role models, for heroes in their life, but they're not sure that they can find them. Or if they were to look for them, not sure where to go. They want people to tell them the truth, but are not sure that they want to take it as it's given to them. What to do with that generation millennial or generation alpha? What about the generation beta that's coming down the pike? What's the message that we share with them? You're a grandparent, you're a parent, you have nieces and nephews. What is the message that we are giving our children, our teenagers, and their families today? Is it a message of hope? Because this generation is not feeling hopeful. They've seen their jobs disappear. Remember earlier? I said the parents have to move. 12 of them have to move by June of next year because their jobs have taken them somewhere else or been eliminated altogether. There's no such thing as pensions anymore, folks. Job security disappeared 25 years ago. There's not much hope for our teenagers today. The world that we grew up in is quite different than the world that they live in. The good news is they're still created like we were. They're still human. They still have the needs and emotions that we do. They also have that hole in their heart that needs to be filled, which you and I believe is the life of Christ, the relationship that we can have in Christ. But it takes a village to make a difference. It takes a church, it takes a community, it takes you, it takes me, it takes us to change the lives of these young people. I can't do it alone. In the last 8 confirmation classes that we've had since I moved here, like I said, in 2002, we've confirmed about 160 teenagers through the years. Several of them have gone off to lives and careers, jobs, if you will, that are involved in the church. A whole lot more have gone in a direction that shocks me. Those who had a passion and a burning and desire to follow Christ and do what He wanted them to do and go where He wanted them to go. The world got its claws stuck into them. Because unfortunately, we have, as a church, as a nation, as a country, as people, let them down. They say we've let them down somehow, some way. That kind of hurts my feelings. Does it hurt you a little bit? Because the relationship that we had with them at the time, it seemed to be good, it seemed to be right, we gave them the information, but somehow the world has a way of changing what they believed, what they thought they knew. You know, we often joke about how when they turn 18 and go off to school, that they disappear for about 12 years. And when they're 30, they'll come back to the church, they'll bring their children to Sunday school. Mike, my house, there's a microphone here. We hope that they'll come back to the church, but that's not always a given anymore. So what do we do? Have you ever felt like you're being watched? You ever had that weird sensation that somebody's watching you or observing you? Even when there may not be anybody around, you ever had the sensation like Big Brother's kind of watching, the cameras are looking at you. You're going into a department store and you know somebody in the camera is watching you somewhere. You go into a school or you drive down the street, you got security cameras. Mike, I'm falling apart up here. You ever just get that sensation that you're being watched? Big Brother is watching, somebody's got his or her eye on you? Well, you probably are. Fix me up there, dude. That's okay. Thank you. Oh, that was technology these days. Thank you. You probably are. You probably are being watched. You are being watched. Every single day, every moment of every day, you and I are being watched, being observed, being noticed by somebody, somewhere. Our relationships, our families, culture, our educational system, the church, everywhere you go, everything we do, we're being watched by somebody. I'm here to remind you that regardless of your age, you and I are being watched by what we say, by what we do, and by what we don't say, and what we don't do as well. Gone are the days when we used to say, do as I say and not as I do. That never worked anyway, did it? Those days are long gone. We've also bought into this whole concept that what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. That's not true either. We've been into that, we laugh about it, but we say it every day. What happens in Vegas, as if we can go anywhere, do whatever we want to, and come back and be the same people. Folks, the hypocrisy of that, it does not work. Sometimes our parents, sometimes we will say that, I don't make my kids go to church anymore. I want them to have the things that I didn't have when I was growing up. You ever said that? Some people still say that today. Some of the parents that I encounter with this group of kids, they'll say, I want to give to him or to her the things I didn't have, but the problem is the pendulum has swung so far the other way that in our attempt to give them things that they want, we fail to give them the things that they need. And what they need is Christ. They need a future. They need a hope. And they need you. They need you. They need me somehow. They need us. We've heard the expression a few years ago, the big catchphrase. Years ago, if you were in a Christian circle, they used to say, you may be the only Bible some people ever read or ever hear. You remember that expression? It used to be the big thing of the church years ago. And actually, that's not too far off. 2 Corinthians 3:2, Paul says, yes, you are that letter written on our hearts to be shown and read by everybody. That's just not a catchphrase. That's a paraphrase from 2 Corinthians 3:2. We are that letter. Somebody's reading it. What's the message you're sending? After that catchphrase, there's this big generation where WWJD, what would Jesus do, is on bracelets and t-shirts and necklaces and on our Bibles. Everybody was like, WWJD, WWJD. Mostly when you're about to do something wrong or say something you shouldn't say. What would Jesus do? What would Jesus say? But then that also went by the wayside. Now we adopt the catchphrases of certain stupid commercials where they do, what's up? Remember all the stupid beer commercials? What's up? What's the catchphrase that we want our people, our young people, to hear and be today? Folks, we need to just stop playing church sometimes and just going through the motions, because it's so much more than that. You're being watched. You're being listened to. You're going to be a role model. You already are a role model. The question is, are you a good role model or are you a bad role model? And whether you're related to them or not, there are kids here who come here to our church, who go to our youth groups, who come to the picnics and come to the days that are coming up, like the trunk or treat or the fall fest, and they are watching and they are listening. What is that commercial? What is that slogan you and I are sending to them? Folks, they need people who live lives of excellence, of passion, of compassion, lives of holiness. They need to know that being a Christian is the best option. It's the only option. Because they go out there in the world and somehow they feel that they've got to test this or not believe in this. And so that's part of the exploration that this generation does. That age group, they want to find out, learn, and experience. But so often they get so far off track that they forget to get back home. They don't know how to get back home. And that's where you come back into the picture. They're looking at you. They're looking at me. They're listening to us. The question is, what message do we want them to know? Recently, I was on a vacation, and the vacation didn't quite go as planned, so I had a lot of extra free time in my home recently. And so I spent a lot of time on the computer, catching up on some reading, things that I didn't do or interest. And of course, you catch up with all your friends on Facebook. And one thing when I was on Facebook recently, and I don't recommend any of you doing it, I went back to see if my old friends from high school and college were on Facebook, to see what they look like now or what they've done with their lives. And I really recommend you don't do that. I really recommend, because those people look really old. They look really, really old. Gray hair, no hair, been married 2 or 3 or 5 times, and their careers went way off course. Yet it's depressing, isn't it? It can be depressing. Let me tell you about this kid named Albie Sparks. He was all right, is that better? E.T. phone home. Albie Sparks, good friend of mine in high school. We played soccer together at the high school we went to. And Albie, I was always second rate. He was the guy that all the guys wanted to be, and he was the guy that all the girls wanted to be with. Albie was a good-looking guy, and everybody fell all over him. And he was smart, huge career ahead of him in business, and very charismatic. Everybody loved Albie Sparks. When I saw Albie Sparks on Facebook a couple weeks ago, I didn't recognize Albie Sparks. Albie Sparks, like I said, he's old. Albie Sparks is a very, very sick person. Married and divorced 3 times, 8 children, incarcerated many, many times through the years, has addictions of all kinds, and will die very, very young. Albie Sparks, the person that everybody wanted to be or to be with. Very sad. It's very eye-opening. And I remember just thinking, gosh, Albie, you got everything made. You got the world. You could do anything you want to. And he did. And he did. And the world paid him back for the things that he did along with the world. But let me tell you one more story, if I could, about another guy that I found on Facebook from college days. His name was Jeff Schaefer, and I'll end with this. Jeff Schaefer was a good friend of mine, like I said, at Asbury College. Asbury College is a little Christian college right outside of Lexington, Kentucky. Jeff Schaefer and I were hall mates. We didn't share a room, but we shared a hall. And Jeff Schaefer, nobody ever called Jeff Schaefer Jeff or Jeff Schaefer. We always called him Snooze, S-N-O-O-Z-E, because he slept a lot. I mean, he took naps, he slept at night. Any chance that he could get some extra sleep, whether it was on a bus somewhere or 30 minutes, if he could take a nap, he would. So we called him Snooze. And a couple years after we had graduated from college, he had gone his way and I had gone my way, but I made my way back to Ohio State University to work on my master's up there. And we had connected. Now remember, this is before GPS and cell phones were the big deal. We were still using AAA maps and they highlight the whole direction thing out, right? So he was coming up from Georgia to visit with me. I was outside of Columbus, Ohio at the time, like I said. And he wanted to visit for the weekend. And we'd had the weekend, and he had to get back to I-75 in Ohio. If you've been there, you kind of know where that's at. So he needed to get back to the interstate to get back home to where he needed to go. And he says, well, I can't find my way from where I was living at the time, he said, to the interstate. If he can find his way to the interstate, he can make his way home. So I said, all right, we'll drive 2 different cars. I'll take you to the interstate, and you can go there. But I said, there's a Wendy's restaurant right there at the intersection. Why don't we just grab a bite to eat before you go back on your way? And we'll just say goodbye at that point. So we did. We walked into this Wendy's. Now, like I said, I was an Asbury College student. And so just out of a chance, I threw on an Asbury College sweatshirt. That's what I was wearing that day. And Snooze and I had gone in, we got our order, and we sat down and began to eat. But before we started our meal, I said, let's pray. So he and I just bowed our heads, as I always do with the teenagers, always have, because they think, why not? Thank God for everything we have. So we said our little prayer, and we began to talk. And we were there doing our thing for about 5 minutes. Now, I want you to hear where this is going. And I don't want you to read into something that is not. This is not a story about me. I don't want you to hear this as a story about, yay, Robert. I want you to hear it because this is so important, because God can use all of us. But what had happened, we started talking after our prayer, and this woman with her 3 boys, one a young high schooler, a young middle schooler, and 2 younger than him, and they started walking toward us. They had been at a table eating, and she came over, she brought her sons with her. They had been eating there and just finished up and walked over to us, and she says, I hate to interrupt. She says, I just need to tell you this, what just happened. And we're like, oh, okay. So she says, my sons and I were eating before you walked in, And she says, I've been having such a trouble, so many problems trying to get them to pray before their meals. They feel it's embarrassing that they shouldn't have to do it. They're men now. They don't need to do these kinds of things. And that people want to make fun of them. And why do I make them pray before their meals? And so she says, we have family that have gone to Asbury College. We know it's a Christian college. We know what it's like. And we have people come to our church from Asbury College to talk about it. They send missionaries around the world. They send preachers around the globe to try to make a difference in the world. She said, when I saw you walk in with that Asbury College sweatshirt, she says, boys, I want you to watch something. She says, when those guys sit down to pray, or sit down to eat, they are going to pray before their meal. Now, she's telling me this. She says, oh, Lord, please make them pray. Please make them pray before they eat. Of course, we didn't know any of this. And she says, oh, Lord, strike them dead if they don't pray, the whole thing. So she says, we watched you. All four of us watched you as you sat down together and you put your food out there on that table. And all four of us watched you before you ate, pray together and out loud. She says, no amount of talking on my part, no amount of preaching on my part would have done what you were able to do. And she says, you made an impact on those boys' lives forever. There's been so many times through the years, that's been about 20 years ago-ish. I've often wondered what happened to those boys, whatever became of them and their families. And something silly or stupid or simple as that maybe may make the difference between life and a better life for somebody. Even though you may not have children in your home right now, or even if you do, or you have grandchildren, somebody that you love very much, there's something that you can do for them. I need you. I can't do this by myself. And I ask and covet your prayers each and every day as we continue to serve teenagers and their families.